We breaking bread, we breaking bread, we breaking bread, one conversation at a time. We breaking bread, we breaking bread, we breaking bread, one conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Breaking Bread Village. I am really honored and excited to have the conversation that we're going to have this evening. I'm going to just bring on our guests so they can go ahead and introduce themselves so we can get into the discussion. So I'm going to bring everybody on, and then after everybody's on, each person can introduce themselves. So here we go. Awesome. Well, welcome, each and every one of you all. I'm so happy that and blessed to have you all here today. I'm always thankful for my guests because I love having these conversations and just kind of understanding everybody's in different, perspectives and different viewpoints and thoughts. So I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. We'll have Nathan, Jackson, Jonathan, and Tommy. This is all the people this is the order that you're on my screen. So Nathan, Jackson, Jonathan, and Tommy. So go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron, for having me and having all of us on your show. It's really a pleasure and really an honor also to be here. So my name is Nathan. I use he, him pronouns. My family's based in Maryland, but I was actually born in New York. And actually, that's where I am based right now. I don't know what you wanted in the way of introduction, but in college, I was a major in African-American studies. I also focused a little bit on data science. And now post-college, I'm working in New York City as a program associate at a foundation. And long-term, hopefully trying to go to law school and do some cool civil rights law, maybe.
Awesome. Yes, that's awesome. Well, thank you. Okay, Jackson.
Hi, my name is Jackson. I use he, him pronouns. My family is, I say we're originally from Jersey, so I'm Jersey bred. I'm currently out in Pennsylvania, however, Eastern Pennsylvania. In undergrad, I majored in mechanical aerospace engineering and got a minor in Chinese language. And right now I am in Pennsylvania working as an aerospace systems engineer.
Awesome. Chinese. Wow. I tried Chinese. That did not work for me. That was just too much. So I applaud you. I definitely applaud you. Thank you. Jonathan.
I'm Jonathan. Grew up originally from Midland, Michigan. Grew up with your sons. Went to Princeton, studied politics. And now I work in DC in government affairs.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Tommy.
Yeah. Again, Aaron, thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure and an honor. And I went to Princeton. I majored in ecology and evolutionary biology and was pre-med through that track. And I minored in public health and health policies. And currently, I grew up in, I was also born in New York, though.
Okay.
And then I am now currently in Boston working at a hospital.
Oh, awesome. I love Boston. Awesome. Well, again, welcome everyone. And, I just wanted to have just a real transparent conversation. I always think about, and I have four, you all may not know this, but I have four sons. And as I watched them grow up, there were so many different expectations set on them being Black males. People had different ideas where they thought they were going to do positive or negative, right? Sometimes people say, okay, well, by this age, you'll be a statistic or you'll do this, or, you have on the other side where people say, oh, well, you can't do this. It's just all these different expectations that are set on Black males. And I just want to preface this with this statement is that I don't like to always talk about Black, white, Asian, Hispanic. I don't like talking about that. But unfortunately, in our society, in our world, people base things on that, unfortunately. So we have to talk about it because that's the only way for us to navigate sometimes to certain systems or certain spaces. So just wanted to start off by saying that. So, so with my four sons, they had so many expectations. And I'm like, wow, it's so much kind of on their shoulders to be this or not do this, to where it can be difficult to navigate in certain spaces. So I wanted to talk to you all about your experience at Princeton. and just some things that obstacles you may have had, what your experiences were, or, some good parts of being at Princeton. And sometimes being Black males, what that looked like. So Nathan, I want to start with you. Again, you're the first person on my screen. And I just want you to kind of tell me just your experience at Princeton and what it was like being there, coming from, particularly, you said you're from New York. You were from New York, right? So, and then going to Princeton and going into this different world, so to speak. How was your experience there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think the best way to start with, like, how was Princeton, was asking, like, what came before Princeton.
Sure.
And you're right that I was born in New York, and my family raised me in Maryland. So in high school, I was actually based outside of DC, and I went to a school that was predominantly Black and Asian, but there was a magnet program that I guess was like more highly resourced, and that was like the part of the school that was sending students to places like Princeton. And I was fortunate enough to kind of like weasel my way in there, which was actually like against the norm, because it was this like magnet program where it was like primarily white, primarily Asian, and there weren't really Black and brown students. So I went from like a small, like primarily white institution inside my like predominantly not white school to a full predominantly white institution where I feel like I had to like make my own smaller school that happened to be like Black, brown, reflected people that looked like me and sort of my values. And so, yeah, so my school was, again, primarily Black and brown. And then I went to Princeton, and it was really kind of disorienting. It was kind of familiar to like, get acquainted to like the academics and the things like that. But the social scene was really what I thought was, there was just nothing like it. And I was like knee deep in it, and I had no idea. I actually applied to Princeton without telling my parents, like, because I didn't think I was going to get in. Like, no one told me that, hey, you can apply to this. Like, you could get into this. Like, it was my counselor, my teacher. Like, no one told me. I didn't have that sort of belief in myself. And fortunately, like, it did, because I think at the end of the day, like, going to Princeton was a thoroughly challenging experience, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And I was talking to a friend about this recently. I don't know if I would do it again, but I'm glad I'm on the other side of it. And I got to like have that experience in my bag. I don't even know where to start though with a specific experience.
No, you know what you just said, Nathan, though, the part in regards to you didn't think that was something that was possible for you because no one told you that it was. And unfortunately, sometimes in different communities, that's what happens. We don't always branch out, because it's this tunnel vision. I know one girl that I kind of like mentored, and she was kind of, she's saying, hi, Jonathan. A girl that I mentored, she went through that where it was like, why don't you go to an HBCU? That was the end of it, where it was like, you have to go to an HBCU. You need to represent the family because your mom went to an HBCU, your father went to, it was this thing and this type of responsibility that she had, and she didn't want to go to an HBCU, but it was that pressure. So I'm not saying that's what happened from your parents, but I'm just saying I like how you talked about how you didn't even think that was something that you could do. So you kind of secretly did it, just like, I'll apply there. Even though you obviously were qualified to go there, you didn't think that you were kind of worthy of that because nobody told you were. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Jackson, we'll get into some more things later. Jackson?
Yeah. So I'll also talk a little bit about like the before Princeton aspect, because that felt relevant for my experience as well. So I went to the same school before Princeton for 13 years, which was very cool, very much a slog at times. It was a private school in New Jersey. I was very blessed to have been able to benefit from the financial aid program, and it was very much a fit for me because I truly would not have survived in a lot of the surrounding schools around me. And so while I received really phenomenal education and had a lot of really great experiences, it was not terribly diverse. It was more diverse by the time I graduated. It was 50% students of color, give or take, by the time I finished. In the beginning, it was 20% or so.
Okay.
And I became there were not really many spaces where I was around very many Black students. I graduated with a class of 130, and of those 130, there were non-Black students, including myself. And by the time
Oh,
it was tough. By the time I graduated, I don't really remember having had very many classes with the Black students either, just because of the course that we took and the interest that we had and things like that. So I became very used to not being around very many Black students, which was helpful as it relates to, like moving to Princeton. So Princeton was a very familiar space. The school that I went to was not as old as Princeton, but was not very far behind in age, and so had a lot of similar culture around it. A lot of things were very familiar, things that I already knew how to navigate, even if I didn't particularly like them or love them. But the downside was, there was a lot of stifling of my own identity that I became able to manage. And my mom runs a diversity consulting firm right now. So we were always talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion at home. But there was a degree to which I was able to mask, I'd say about second, third grade. And I really developed and honed that skill, unfortunately, as a survival mechanism. The classes I was in didn't have very many Black students. The sports I played didn't have very many Black students. My coach was particularly problematic. And even worse than that was he was unaware that he was problematic. He thought he was doing a pretty good job, which made it tough. And yeah, I think I came into Princeton pretty much knowing the pitfalls of a very, very white school. And I navigated those pretty well. But there wasn't a lot of me in that experience. And I would say by the time I graduated, I really found, I had a strong community my freshman, sophomore year, but my junior, senior year, I really built on that community and got to know some really amazing, some more really amazing Black and brown students who are lifelong friends and who I intend to have in my life, this one, the next one, whatever. So that was really healing and restorative for me, to be able to get to a space where I no longer had to mask a lot of my interests, and I didn't feel as though I had to validate any of my interests by displayed of intellectualism or anything like that. But that was something, that definitely came in the latter half of my college experience.
okay, and thank you for sharing that. And what really stuck out to me, a lot of that stuck out, but one thing in particular was in regards to you saying that you learned at a young age survival in certain environments or certain spaces, which is something that I feel like as people of color, sometimes we've learned a lot. We learn how to do it. We learn how not to say certain words or say ain't or say this and that, even though I do it all the time. But we learn, in certain settings that you can't, you can't do that because, people already view you a certain way. So you have to learn how to kind of navigate, which is a lot. It is stressful. It is draining. It's just a lot to do. So that's one thing that stuck out with me, because a lot of people share that same story where it says, okay, I went to this environment that was predominantly didn't look like me. And I had to kind of learn how to navigate through that space, which is a lot. But thank you for sharing your story. And we'll get back to a little bit more of that. But Jonathan, can you share your kind of sum up your experience? And you can kind of talk about your before too in going there as well.
Yeah, there. Definitely a lot of what Jackson said, the point you just brought up as well. When I grew up in Midland, I experienced a lot of an overall good experience in this town, but had experienced a lot of bullying and harassment and humiliation up until I graduated. So by the time I was ready to graduate, I was about ready to try something new. Midland is a town of at the time I grew up, it was about 2% Black people. So oftentimes I was used to being around majority white people, apologies, and didn't really have many friends of color, let alone Black friends. But fortunately enough, my parents, was privileged enough to have my parents both go to college and push me to apply and so on and so forth. And that was the expectation. But kind of to your point, Aaron, everyone in my family except for my father, and extended family as well, went to HBCU. And so I applied to HBCU, of course. I didn't have an option. But when it came down to it, I was choosing between Princeton and Howard. And Princeton, the financial aid there was really good and made it financially just smarter to go to Princeton. I remember feeling a little guilty to be the one, at least on my generation, my sisters and cousins, to break that tradition. But overall, and I was also nervous. I was told, my grandmother told me at the time, like, you made your choice. It's a good school and everything, but know what you're expecting in these kind of schools. Because when we were first touring there, it was in the midst of kind of a Princeton controversy moment with the Woodrow Wilson School, which they've since changed. And so there was a lot of, it felt like racial tension when we visited campus. And so I kind of expected something of that sort, the residual effects of that at least, to be on campus, but wasn't really anything like what I experienced in Midland in any sense, and was able to, like Jackson said, it was the most diverse school I've ever been to, the most diverse community I've ever been to, not only race-wise, but socioeconomic. So it was really, for me, overall, Princeton was a moment of working through a lot of what I experienced growing up and learning so much more and gaining these lifelong connections, like Jackson said. And so that's a little bit about my before and enjoying during and after Princeton.
Awesome. Thank you. I like how you said working through some of the stuff that you went through, because there were some hardships that you went through in Midland, Michigan. I know that very well. And so with that said, to then go to higher education, higher learning, and kind of be in the same space because it looks the same, but you took that opportunity to kind of grow from what you went through. So I really applaud that. But I like how you talked about, breaking that tradition, breaking that train. That's a lot of pressure. People don't understand the pressure that they put on people sometimes when they want you to keep this legacy. It's like, I don't want to do that, but it's this idea that I have to do it, because then people kind of, and people, I don't think they mean bad by it, but they don't understand, the pressure that comes with that when you feel like you have to live up to an expectation that you don't necessarily want to do. So thank you for sharing that. Tommy?
Yeah, so I'll also do a little pre-Princeton into Princeton. So I grew up, like I said before, in North Carolina. It was a town called Pinehurst. It's rural, suburban, but mainly predominantly white. And I also was going to private school up until I had gone to college. But I actually, for high school, had gone to a boarding school. So slightly different experience. I was exposed to a much more diverse community from the age of like 13, 14. And it was, far from home. I got like a lot of, of the college independence experience from a younger age, and felt like I was able to navigate, it was still a predominantly white institution. I'd been familiar moving through predominantly white spaces basically all of my life, but it was in a different setting. Like you said before, when talking about just the subtle code switching that might happen when you're in different environments. A lot of people would remark when I say I'm from North Carolina, oh, you don't have an accent. And it's primarily because of my parents. My parents are from Nigeria, and I don't think, from growing up in our house, an accent wasn't ever something that really came through. But my brother stayed in the school in the South, and if you talk with him, you might think that he has a little bit more of a Southern accent. But I think it was the boarding school I went to, Rosemary Hall, and it was a good primer, I think, for me in terms of setting expectations of what to expect at Princeton. I felt like I hit the ground running for the most part, and had a natural tendency to just try to create my own support network of Black and Brown friends and advisors or faculty members. And I think that it allowed me to feel assured in who I was and myself, like when navigating different spaces at Princeton. And I think that benefited me greatly. I think one of the greatest pieces of advice I ended up getting was my freshman year from a mentor. His name was Ashiel, and Jonathan, Nathan, and Jackson would all be familiar with him, telling me that I should feel as entitled to any space in Princeton as any other student, and that the school is as much mine as it is anybody else's. So I think that hearing that from a senior as a freshman was really grounding, and I think allowed me to really weather the storm that was that institution. It is a net positive experience overall, I would definitely say, but it's not without its trials and tribulations.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And when you said that this institution is as much as yours as anybody else's, that's really powerful, because sometimes when we don't feel empowered in certain spaces, we definitely can have that insecurity. Like, do I deserve to be here? I mean, because you all, clearly are very intelligent. I mean, that's a given. But sometimes even with that, you can sometimes still feel like you don't necessarily belong in a certain space. So I'm glad that you had someone that was older and who kind of went through it already to kind of tell you, look, you deserve to be here. So do your thing is basically what he was saying. Do your thing because you are supposed to be here. So I appreciate that. I also want to talk about some of the experiences with other Black people at the school. I will share something from one of my sons. I remember when he first started school and he was around, all these Black people. He's like, okay, I'm going to kind of, get to know them and kind of, connect with them. And he was treated different because he spoke, a little bit more proper, was told, you sound white or you sound this, or why do you talk like that? So did you experience that at all, Chris? I'm just curious because I know it was really difficult for him because he was like, whoa, because he went in thinking that, okay, we're all going to kind of connect, but it was a little difficult at times. Did anybody experience that? Anybody? If you didn't, it's okay. Nathan, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I personally didn't experience that. I don't know if it was, I assume it went on in some spaces, but I think to a comment that Jackson maybe had made beforehand was just that, I don't know, given how small the Black population at Princeton was, I don't know if there was really like a lot of incentive to try to, I don't know, sort of like demarcate, like, I don't know who was doing Blackness correctly or not. Like it definitely happened, but I'm not sure if like language was the way that it was done. I think it was done in like other ways where people were trying to like, either validate like where they felt or where they felt other people belonged. But I didn't see that happening with languages as much as like what people did with their either spare time or what activities they were involved in or what others.
What do you mean by that? I'm sorry. Like what do you
like? I feel that I never experienced that like sort of language check where people were saying like, oh, you don't speak like vernacular or you do speak vernacular. Like I didn't see that. It was more like there were other like signals for like whether someone was like, I guess, being a good Black person or not. And it wasn't like language. It was like what activities you were involved in, whether you were like in a dance group maybe, or I guess things like that, instead of like language. That was just my personal experience. But
no, yeah,
thinking of like trying to how to wrap around and think of other ways that people kind of do that same sort of like checking, like people that are different than them.
Okay. Does anybody else have an example of something where maybe the Nathan is talking about where it's not necessarily language, but it was kind of like that checking of activities or so? Because I'm just curious because and I try not to get into all of that with people because I try to treat everybody as an individual. But I do know that we are kind of tribal at times and we kind of like to group people into these different categories, which is so annoying, but it's kind of our human nature. So I was just curious if you all experienced that or not at the school.
Yeah, I'll add something. I think the first thing I want to say, though, is like that sort of process that Nathan was alluding to. I don't really think it is from any place of negativity. I think ultimately a lot of us got to this place in Princeton in an objective sense through a lot of adversity, masking, coping. And there's a degree to which you have to be able to figure out how another Black person has coped for your own sense of self-preservation. Because it's one thing to receive harm from someone who shouldn't be in your group, but it's a lot more painful if you think you have a kinship with someone and then you find out that either they've coped so hard that they have lost themselves or they've convinced themselves that they don't belong to whatever group you think you belong to. So I don't really think it's an antagonistic thing. I think it's purely based off of self-defense and really natural. And to the point about language, I don't remember that happening, and that's probably because if one person was to say that like another person was white because of how they spoke, then no Black person at Princeton would be considered Black, because we're all a bunch of like hyper intellectual nerds. It's not to say that other people outside of Princeton aren't, but there's a certain level of nerddom and not for nothing intellectual ego that comes with like being in that space. And so a lot of people use big words and speak quote unquote fancy. I think it came a lot more in subtle hints about things that speak to who a person really is. So activities was definitely one because that kind of signifies who you feel comfortable around. One thing that I remember, I have distinct memories of saying something and like feeling the energy in the room shift around their comfort around me, is because I know I was someone who, like, my first couple of years at Princeton was in groups that were mostly white people, and people knew that, and it was sort of like, it's the vibe on this guy. That's totally fine. Like I harbor no ill will. It makes sense. And I remember telling someone that I listened to Earl Sweatshirt, and immediately that person being like, oh, okay, this is like a person who like I can associate with, because like
you passed the test. You kind of passed the test.
Yeah, and it was very, because, you know, like if I had said like, oh, I listen to Kanye West, like in some ways that is even worse. But me saying like, oh, I listen to Earl Sweatshirt, very indicative of the fact that like there was a portion of Black history that I am invested enough in to like seek my own niche, to go past sort of mainstream media, and to be, and it, like, even if the other person didn't like Earl Sweatshirt, they know that I can talk about the genre of rap music to a degree beyond Z100 and, you know, Empire State of Mind. And so I think it was things like that that really signal, you know, the type of music you listen to, random words that you say offhandedly if you like forget to code switch in that moment, the ways you accessorize, like lots of subtle things like that that really speak more to how your character shines through in the moments where you don't mask. I think were the ways that people sort of figured out.
Okay, Jackson, you say mask a lot. So do you feel like, and there's nothing wrong with that, I'm just picking up on that word because I believe a lot of people do that. I mean, and that's of all colors. People mask all the time, so we won't even get into that. But I'm just saying, in regards to different spaces, do you feel like you had to mask a lot, or were you able to kind of be yourself? Did you kind of find yourself along the journey? How'd that work?
I 1000% masked. I was a different person in class than I was. So MA, like my department has no Black professors, and my minor department obviously has no Black professors because it's Chinese language. So that goes without saying. And a lot of the activities that I did didn't have a lot of Black people in it either. And so there was a degree to which the entry period required some amount of masking. And then there was like a steady growth where I became more comfortable with them. And then also by the time I graduated, there was many spaces where I didn't feel like I had to mask at all. But it was definitely something I had to do, because I'm also, like, you can't really see in this image, but I'm significantly larger than most of the people I would have attended class with. And so like there's just a big Black guy studying.
Coming towards them, yes.
Yeah, and so I had to really do a lot to be like, no, I'm not Terry Crews. I'm just the nerd who like ate a lot of protein. Is very simple. So yeah, definitely had to do that, but I definitely learned how to not do that as well.
No, I totally understand that. All my sons are pretty tall, and at a young age, they were looked as kind of like intimidating or a threat, and they were the biggest teddy bears, not threatening at all, but people saw them that way because of, their height and size and stuff. Jonathan, do you feel like you had to mask a lot there? And I'm using that word only because that's kind of like the word we've been using, but do you feel like you had to do that?
I think in some sense, I mean, if we're talking about the Black community at Princeton, I mean, coming from Midland, obviously didn't get a lot of exposure to Black spaces of visiting my family and extended family in Detroit. And so I think, to be honest, going to Princeton and being around and having an opportunity to make friends of different backgrounds made me really insecure about the lack of experience I had with people from different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
The Black community, I feel like a lot of the times, looking back even, and at the time being, I felt like I was performing some sense of Blackness, as uncomfortable as it is to say, just because of the limited exposure, quite frankly, that I had. That coincided as well with my just general interest in activism work in Midland, and transferred over to Princeton and found myself in a lot of the spaces now that I was organizing in and working in were predominantly Black. And so in some sense, it was natural that my interests aligned quite a bit, overlapped with a lot of people of color, Black and brown people. But at the same time, still be in those spaces, feeling a little bit uncomfortable just because not knowing how, maybe in a sense, how to carry myself, if I'm growing up, being more comfortable in predominantly white spaces at the very beginning of Princeton, at least. And as course went on, we're kind of learning and unlearning that process and coming more into myself, which I feel like Princeton helped me do by the end of it, feeling much more, kind of going away from some of those ideas of at least feeling insecure in my own Blackness, and recognizing that that's maybe not as uncommon a trait as I felt, perhaps, especially at Princeton. The way Jackson and Nathan described is just a different way everyone copes. Perhaps I was just a way of coping as well. But I forgot with that one. But general, the mass felt a little more nuanced in that sense. And I think the more comfortable I felt with myself, the more, to be honest, the less of a mask I want to put up. And then when I went back to majority white spaces, even coming back to Midland, when I had the chance. And so, I think through the time throughout Princeton, kind of rejection, feeling I got a mask at first, and then kind of rejecting that on both ends by the end.
Okay. Tommy, did you feel like you had to do that? I'm just curious about this because you all don't know me very well, but I'm a really kind of like a free spirit, kind of a free person, and I, of course, have code switched. I mean, I've masked things in certain spaces to a degree, just because it's just almost uncomfortable sometimes to authentically be yourself in some spaces because everybody is so different that it's kind of uncomfortable. It's not really necessarily where I'm afraid to be myself, but it's just uncomfortable because everybody else is talking this way, everybody else is doing this. And then if I do this, it's just, people look at you, they ask questions. It's just easy to just kind of blend in, which is hard for me to do, but I do try my best. But I'm just curious, did you feel like you had to do that, Tommy? While you were there kind of masked, and not even necessarily with the Black community, but just being in those spaces, did you ever feel like you had to kind of mask or do the code switching? I'm just curious.
Not particularly. And I would say that that's mainly because I thought I've been already conditioned of how to feel like I can express myself comfortably in different spaces, like coming in. I feel like I kind of established that really in school primarily, but just from the foundation and reinforcement from home, really. So, as I mentioned before, like I didn't feel necessarily like insecurities with voicing my opinion in different spaces or allowing myself to come through in different spaces. I felt like if I wasn't necessarily feeling as accepted or like, like melding that space, I probably just wouldn't go to that space unless I felt like I needed or wanted to be there. So, but I think that I also just, as a personality or in general, like tend to try to think a bit more before I speak most often and try to be like conscious and mindful of other people's, opinions and not. So I feel like I just naturally have like a little bit of an inhibitor saying like, oh, like before I try to look before I leap in most situations. I don't attribute that necessarily to saying like, oh, I'm in this space. Like, let's say with a bunch of non-Black people, we need to act differently. More as just like, am I in class? Am I in precept? Am I in a dining hall? Am I? It's more circumstantial based on my environment, but not necessarily who's in it or who's not. But I do echo the sentiment of the different coping measures that Jackson was articulating, and I think that was a really poignant point. I also felt like coming in, there was for me at least, like there was a real frustration that sometimes came. Like going back to your point of understanding if like people were checking each other in some sort of way, and knowing that it wasn't strictly in the language sense. I think another environment, like, you know, more concretely where I could see it happen in activities is who's showing up to Black events that are run on campus, who's organizing Black events that are happening on campus. And over the years, it like become it was generally the same folk, but I think there was, in the early years, at least I felt some level of frustration when you wouldn't see some folks coming up or showing up, and like you sometimes have to like over time realize you have to get yourself like, you know, there are a few of us to start, and we're spread very thin, and we are doing a million different things to this college. So even if you're just talking amongst Black men on campus, you know, however many are going to be in practice, you know, with their sport at the time that might be happening. And I have some friends that were athletes at the time that I should have gone to this event, but I had practice at that time, or,
Sure.
or you know, at office hours, or in another club that's happening, that, or they're trying to take up leadership in that club because it's you know, they feel propelling, you know, their social experience based on, you know, like Jackson was saying, different coping mechanisms. So I became a lot less judgmental, I felt like, as time went on. But at the same time, there was an understanding, like, I think there were definitely folk on campus who would get frustrated, you know, if someone's not showing up to an event.
If a Black person didn't show up to a certain Black event, you know, it's so interesting. Listen to all, you know, 4 of you all. It's so interesting because a lot of times we do not even see, how do I want to say it? So everybody has spoke to some degree of coping mechanism, or, you know, kind of masking, or learning how to do this. We don't learn at such a young age how we are kind of trained and taught to navigate in certain spaces, to where it even seems normal that we did this, but really in some ways it's not all the time, because we can't really always be our authentic self, because we're spending so much time making sure that we navigate properly through this space, when really all of our spaces individually are okay by themselves. Does that make sense? You know, when I talk to so many people from different backgrounds, you know, that go into predominantly Caucasian spaces, we all say the same thing, where it's this idea that, you know, oh, I did fine because I learned how to do this, or my mother taught me how to do this, you know, or, I mean, just like with my sons, I teach them when they're driving what to do if they get stopped by the police, or, you know, if they go into a store, or even my son trying to speak to his professor, I told him kind of what to say, because if you say it this way, you'll sound, you know, it's this idea. And I'm sure all parents from all backgrounds have done that to a degree with their children. But I feel like as Black students or Black people in certain circles, we teach at such a young age how to navigate, to where we think it's normal that we, you know, or it's like, oh, I did that already. I learned that a long time ago. But it's like, why do we have to learn that? But we understand that we do. I mean, it's just kind of like what it is right now, right? In our time. So I just find that very interesting, even in this discussion right now, that we all are kind of saying the same thing, kind of casually, like, oh, I did that with no ease, because we get taught at such a young age. I mean, do you guys agree with that? And you can tell me if you don't, it's okay. Nathan?
I think I'll hop in first, because my experience might be a little bit outside of like the norm, because I was actually raised for the first years in my life outside of the United States. I was raised in Mexico, and when I was 8 years old, we moved to Maryland, so back to the United States. And I mean, I think there's a real strong point to it being like learned behavior, and like kind of like reinforced over time. Because I remember coming in after like spending 8 years in Mexico, where I mean, obviously racism is a problem everywhere, including in Mexico. And it's some of the same, but also very different, because there obviously aren't Black people, but also like more of the population isn't necessarily white. So it's a very different dynamic, and colorism is definitely at play, especially in
more like a caste system, more so, as opposed to just Black versus white. But it's more of like this. Sometimes it's like the class system, you know, where it's like, okay, do you not have? But go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly, and a lot also like more colorism, where like the lighter your skin, like the more preferential treatment, the darker your skin, less preferential treatment, and I think that made for a different environment because it was also like a very almost like multicultural environment. So people like default assumed other people were different. And so like there were differences, but they were almost like subsumed under this idea of like, oh, well, we're all different. Where in the United States, I think it was a little different where it was like the attitude was to pretend that just we weren't different and just like like close our eyes to the fact that like we come from different backgrounds, different cultures, different experiences, and we're just gonna pretend that we can all, you know, like, you know, be perfectly, you know, non people.
I call that the melting pot like theory that I hate when people say that personally, because like when you melt, I don't know if you ever melted a bunch of stuff together, but like it all kind of fuses together and becomes the same thing. And that kind of goes to what you're saying, Nathan, like how people don't want to recognize that we're all different, and it's okay to be different. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what's so beautiful about it. And it's okay for us to recognize that. So, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point. And I remember just coming to the United States and having to learn through a slow process of iteration to like carry myself in a particular way, especially I was in elementary school at the time. So it was like carrying myself in front of other children as well. And like, just like working through difference and like being and having differences highlighted by like teachers, by students. And like, I didn't appreciate it till like I grew up, but like just realizing it's an actual hellish process of learning those things. And then those behaviors keep getting reinforced until they're drilled down and those habits become like what you've always done. And I just wanted to really just call that out, that it's like, it's not how it's always been. It's not how it ought to be, but that it's drilled into us so deep that sometimes we can't recognize it as like a practice that's foreign or that was put onto us at a particular point.
Yeah. No, very, very, very true. Very good point. Thank you. I just want to ask you all too. So I want to talk about some positive highlights that you all had. There is some learning, some, you know, different learnings that you, I guess, gained from being there. I know, Jonathan, you kind of spoke on it that, you know, some experiences kind of helps you to grow there. So if everybody can kind of, Jackson, if you want to, you can start off by telling me something that, you know, positive that came out of going to Princeton University. I mean, you know, something that, you know, maybe matures you or just kind of stuck with you for a lifetime, if you want to share that.
Yeah, sure. I promise you it's positive in the end. It has a little bit of a bad start. So
that's life sometimes.
I did theater all through high school, and I did theater at Princeton for 3 years. And the reason why I stopped doing theater at Princeton is because I had 2 like full-on emotional breakdowns surrounding one director who did 2 very terrible shows that handled race very, very poorly. It was very bad. But what it caused me to do was, one, get really in touch with a lot of emotions that I had sort of put on ice for the sake of like survival, basically, for, you know, over a decade and so. And 2, it made me realize that I had done theater for like 7 years. Not because I actually really liked theater, but because I always had like artistic inclinations and I knew I was good at theater. So I would kind of hate the process, but I knew at the end I was good enough that people would kind of like applaud me, and then that would be cool. I would sort of make it better. But then I realized that I didn't really love theater all that much and started doing music, which I had sort of been doing on the low since I was 11, but had never given myself the space to like pursue or talk about, because I didn't want to be perceived as like another Black kid who raps. And so, yeah, I stopped doing theater around junior year, and then I started doing music, and that has been a very like restorative healing process. I do it on the side while I work also. And it's been really great. And I made some really amazing friends through it and have made some new friends through it. And it's just been a very wholesome process, and, you know, through the fire and flames, but it was definitely worth it.
Awesome. First of all, I appreciate you for sharing, you know, the intimate part of the first part of that. Thank you for sharing that. And I also want to say, you know, I'm so glad that you were able to see past the whole, I don't want to be another Black guy doing music, because everybody loves music. We all love music, and it's okay. But we get taught, and this is what I'm talking about. And I don't think we realize sometimes we get taught these different things that we try not to be, to not, or whatever, to not fit into some, but it's like, it's okay, you know, because me personally, I love all kind of music. I like some country. I like some, I mean, I'm a music lover. Like I literally love music is life to me. So like, I like all kinds of certain things that just stick out with me. I'm like, oh, I like that. I like rap. I mean, if I'm trying to, you know, make some more money with my, you know, little side hustles, I'll put on some trap music because it's talking about me. I'm just saying, you know, whatever I'm feeling at that moment, you know, and when life gets hard, I'll put on a ballad, or I love opera. I mean, I love all types of music. It just, you know, depends on what I'm feeling. So, but I'm just saying, you know, I'm really happy that you follow that. So thank you for sharing that. Tell me, give me a positive, something that you just, that grew you while you were at Princeton.
No, yeah, for sure. I just want to say I love music. I don't think I have as broad of a range because I don't listen to opera, but I do feel like sending and receiving music is like a form of a love language for me. So like
yes.
Whenever I'm able to like, if someone ever sends me a song and it's like, oh, I think you would like this, I was like, you know me because you listen to this and you're like, wow.
I'm going to find you a good opera that I'm telling you, I can find you one that you'll be like, oh, okay. I'm telling you, okay.
I look forward to it.
Okay. I will find you one. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think for me, a surprising positive was joining the STEP team. That was something that I did.
Okay.
I had never done performing arts before. I was, you know, in STEM through high school and in college. I had done student government in high school, but so I was used to like kind of public speaking, but not really a performance. I didn't think of myself as a dancer, but I think that was a really fun hobby where I met people that I would just not have met elsewhere in college, and have like formed some of my best and like longest standing friendships through that. And also was able to just get in touch with like my more rhythmic side, although I am still a little rigid, but I think it's I think that it was something that kind of loosened me up in good ways, and also again had me more in touch with music. And I felt that some of those friendships also kind of established a formula that I liked to keep in practice in other friendships, which was really like just openness and trust and honesty between people to try to really figure out, you know, how we can best support each other. And I think I can carry that forward in all the friendships as well.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Oh, I wish I would have known you did on the STEP team. I would have had you submit a video. We would have played it on the show to show some of it. Well, thank you for sharing that, Jonathan. And then Nathan, you can go next after Jonathan. Positive growth.
Yeah, like you mentioned earlier, just kind of working through a lot of the things I experienced growing up from a racial sense, but also just I think getting a greater circle of people from my experience, and the people I met at Princeton have taught me and learned so much on a professional, personal level, and that was really cool. And I think in particular, I was part of this co-op that was vegetarian and kosher and sustainability focused, and there are a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds there, and that was a really cool highlight for me in general. Just learning more about being on Earth and the connection to it and so on and so forth, and integrating those practices into personal life. And so outside the classroom, personally, that was a big highlight for me. Awesome.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I love hearing these stories because, you know, again, overcoming expectations. I mean, people don't understand that we all have put some kind of expectation put on us. All of us do, by people in our family, communities, whatever. So I appreciate all of you all. So Nathan, a growth or a positive that you had?
Ooh, yeah. I feel like I had to come up with a good one because I came last. It has to be like the most positive. I don't know if I'm going to clear that hurdle.
No,
so,
it's okay.
One thing that I'm really grateful for, and it's like a huge positive, was like I feel like in college I learned how to listen, like how to like really listen to people and listen to myself. And I think I learned that skill through like putting myself in spaces that I wouldn't have been before. Like in college, I did prison insider tutoring, prison tutoring that had me like tutoring people that were currently incarcerated in like math and reading and things like that. I actually did that like all throughout my college career. And it was a tremendous experience, mostly because it taught me how to listen and how to listen like just in the most compassionate way. And like really like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people like kind of nod along when they're talking to people, or like just like really let the thing kind of like wash over them. But I just learned that in that experience where you only have like an hour with somebody who probably doesn't get to interact very much with like folks that are outside or get to like walk outside and experience, you know, the world and freedom, like it really, really means a lot to like engage with someone like genuinely in that time, because it is so precious and so limited. And so for me, like getting to develop like meaningful friendships and experiences with guys that I ended up like still being in touch with to this day, I think was just one of the most positive experiences, because it just taught me how to listen, and how to listen like truly like across different circumstances, across different life experience, across different like literal physical conditions. And that's something that like I don't think I would have really gotten anywhere else if I hadn't, I guess, kind of gathered skills from Princeton and got the chance to like share them elsewhere, and then learn like how much Princeton actually can't teach you. Like there's certain things that college can't teach you that only like life can. So I think that was the biggest growth, was just learning about that.
I think you did good to be the last person. That was awesome. No, and basically what you're saying is active listening. You know, a lot of times it was so interesting that you said that, because I went to a class, this was years ago, about active listening. And they asked a question like, you know, when someone says, how are you doing? Like somebody asks you how you're doing. A lot of times they really don't care how you're doing. Like it's like just kind of a formality, like, oh, how you doing? And then we kind of walk away, right? So active listening is what you were talking about, where you actually ask somebody, how are you doing? And you actually listen and you care and you have empathy in regards to what they're saying. So that's really cool that you did that. I hope you keep doing that, because that's a really, really important thing within all communities that people need to connect with. I call it the forgotten, people that are kind of forgotten. So I appreciate that wholeheartedly. Well, you know what? I appreciate all you all for coming on here and, sharing your stories, your experiences. It's really been really enjoyable for me, because, you just never know. And when I reached out to Jonathan to reach out to you all, I said, oh, hi, Katie Miller. You're welcome. I really wanted him to get some people that, wouldn't be afraid to speak and just kind of be transparent. And I really appreciate you all for just being just really clear and just really proud in what you went through, because I just want to reiterate that you were supposed to be exactly where you were. And it was, I'm sure it was some hard times, but it also was some beautiful experiences. So I appreciate that. And you all are doing great things right now. And I applaud you for continuing through that, because it's not easy. I mean, going to college period is not easy, I'm sure. Even in today's time and just so much stuff going on, I mean, stuff is hard. My son called me the other day trying to get help. He was working on 2 papers and he's working a job. And he's like, oh my goodness. So it's hard. I was talking to somebody about how, you have children, and then right when they turn 18, we kind of throw them out into these adult, situations and expect them to be adults when just the day before they were children, so it's not easy. It's hard, and you all did it. And I congratulate, because I just want to let everybody know that these are all graduates. You all graduate the same year, correct? Awesome. Well, I applaud you all. I applaud your parents, because, honey, it is hard, and we go through a lot too while y'all in school. Y'all just don't know it. And so I applaud the parents too. But I do appreciate you all for being here today, really, from the bottom of my heart, and sharing your stories. Friends at, oh, here we go. P92. Y'all know who that is?
That's a winter run from the class of '92.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. That's awesome. Well, thanks again. Did you all have any parting words? Give me something. Got 5 minutes.
Great. That's all I have to say. Just thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Jackson. Anybody else?
Yeah, thanks so much for organizing this conversation. It's been good to reflect and also share experiences and to see these guys. It's been a while since some of us have caught up, so it's been good to just hear and even hear new things. It's like just yesterday.
Yeah. Well, aren't you guys kind of all in like the same area a little bit? No, no.
COVID. So.
COVID. I know COVID. Oh, I cannot stand COVID. But you guys are all kind of in the East Coast, right? No? Yes, sort of. Okay. Well, this summer you can go outside and be around each other. So you'll have to do a reunion so you can see each other in person. That you all haven't seen each other since March. Jonathan, do you have any closing words?
Yeah, I want to thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome.
For not only for this particular show, but for general the show. And I like the way you connect the dots, and thanks for connecting tonight. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Oh, I like that. That's my new flyer, connecting the dots. I like that, Jonathan. I'm gonna give you credit if I use it. Okay.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay. Nathan, did you have any closing words?
I just want to express my gratitude to you, Aaron, for giving us this platform to like reflect, to connect with each other, to connect with you, and to ask such thoughtful questions that I feel like open up like little pockets of my experience that I haven't had the prompting to go through myself. So thank you for helping like me process and I guess co-process with these guys too, and for making this part of your show. Like I didn't think I was ever going to get the chance to talk about this, not even especially with like people that I care about and friends of mine, and also with such like a talented like host. So thank you for making this really fun, but also so
I have y'all on again, so you can just keep saying all these beautiful things and just.
I mean, I would.
Oh, we I like doing part twos and things because conversations like this have to take place in all seriousness. We have to talk about stuff because there are a lot of things that we cope with. There are a lot of things that we kind of suppress because you have to just survive. I mean, that's just life, right? And that's from all different spectrums. I mean, we have to survive. So a lot of times we're just kind of tugging along and not really processing like, wow, I just made it through that. Like that was hell. And I didn't realize it was hell because I just made it through. But now that I'm through it and I'm talking about it, it's like, I did that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we don't do that too often with ourselves, and we don't give ourselves the credit that we deserve. Like we made it through. You all made it through an experience. Whatever the experience was, the highs and lows, you made it through. And that should be applauded and definitely talked about because there are other people that go through stuff that never have a platform or never have a shoulder to talk or lean on, so they just kind of keep it to themselves. So when they hear stories like this from you all, they're like, oh, he went through that too? Okay, that means I can make it. They're probably in their, sophomore year right now. Like, I don't know. I want to give up. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate this. And for other people that possibly will be able to be inspired by, your conversations, this is great. So again, thank you all so much. I appreciate the people that are watching and commented. And I wish you all a great evening and we will keep in touch. I'm gonna get y'all numbers because Jonathan was our in-between person, but I have to have the numbers myself so I can reach out to people myself. So I appreciate you guys. And I wish you all still a happy new year. This is still happy new year. And I wish you all a great evening. Thank you. Bye-bye. Awesome. That was such a great conversation. I really enjoyed that. I like, speaking to people about their different experiences and just kind of how they made it through. So I appreciate all four of them for coming on today and taking a little time to share their experience at Princeton University. And I do want to say again that I definitely congratulate them in graduating and pushing through. It's a beautiful thing and it ought to be celebrated. So I celebrate them and I applaud them on this evening. So you guys have a great evening. Thank you.